This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. Looks like we've got Mr. Goddard on. Okay, I'm showing all 7 council members here and accounted for at 7 o'clock. We'll take roll here shortly, but if I get everyone to mute your computers at this point, and we'll all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I should get a little flag to put up in here. All right, thank you, everybody. This meeting this evening is being recorded on a meeting application. Citizens have the opportunity to provide comment this week, provided by a link on our website. So at this time, we'll go ahead and take the roll. Are you able to? No, are you able to? Are you on? Or are you muted? You're not. Okay, go ahead. Okay, that's good.
Here.
Councilmember Rounds?
Here.
Councilmember Plaza?
Here.
Councilmember Chapman?
Here.
Councilmember Fredericks?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Holland?
Present.
All right, everybody's here this evening. Thank you. And just a reminder, when we get down to agenda approval, I forget what it's called when they just waive. I asked that during agenda approval that that council will make a motion to waive the roll call vote to keep it simple until we're back together. So please keep that in mind. And moving on to presentation and proclamations this evening, I have 2 proclamations to read. One is National Police Week, and the other one is National Public Works Week. Whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Woodland Police Department. Whereas there have been more than 16,000 assaults against law enforcement officers in 2019, resulting in approximately 15,000 injuries. And whereas since the first recorded death in 1791, more than 24,155 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and have been killed in the line of duty. Whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas 396 new names of fallen heroes will be added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in the spring of 2021, including 146 officers killed in 2019, including our very own Deputy Justin DeRozier of the Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office and 250 officers killed in previous years, as well as those officers who will sacrifice themselves in this year of 2020. And whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's annual Candlelight Vigil held virtually this year on the evening of May 13th, 2020. And whereas that Candlelight Vigil is part of a National Police Week, which takes place this year on May 10th through the 16th. Because of the COVID-19 virus, some events will take place before or after the official dates of Police Week 2020. Many of the events have been canceled or will be held virtually for 2020. And whereas May 15th is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags should be flown at half staff. Now therefore be it resolved that I, William A. Finn, do hereby formally designate May 10th through the 16th, 2020 as Police Week for the City of Woodland and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation, dated this 18th day of 2020. And I have Chief Kelly here to take this from me this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Appreciate that. Appreciate all
sir.
that you guys do. We really do. Couldn't do it without you. And hopefully this summer we'll be able to get back together and recognize them formally for the job that they do. Thank you. National Public Works Week 2020. And whereas the public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, sewers, streets and highways, public buildings, and solid waste collection. And whereas the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depends on the facilities and services, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of public works officials, and whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now, therefore, I, William A. Finn, do hereby recognize the week of May 18th through the 22nd, 2020 as National Public Works Week, and I can call this observance to the attention of all our citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contributions which public works officials make every day to our health, safety, and comfort and quality of life, dated this 18th day of May 2020. Mrs. Coleman, I'll leave this in your box.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much for all the work that you folks do as well. And again, this summer, hopefully we'll be able to get together for that annual picnic that we do and celebrate all the wonderful things that you folks provide for us. Thank you. Moving on to, do we have any citizen communication for not on the agenda? Okay, is there anyone on the video this evening that would like to provide citizen communication for items not on the agenda? Seeing anyone? How about citizen communications for items on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, is there anyone that is on the video this evening that would like to provide comments for items on the agenda? Not seeing any. Come to the portion of the agenda for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Frederick, seconded by Councilmember Chapman.
I make a motion that we say aye instead of individually being polled.
Point of order.
Mr. Frederick.
I believe what we need here is a motion to suspend the rules. So I move to suspend the rules and allow for a total vote instead of individual, unless a member calls for an individual vote on a specific item.
I'll second.
All right. Motion on the floor from Mr. Fredericks. Suspend the rules for a roll call vote unless otherwise requested by any member of council and seconded by Councilmember Rounds. Councilmember Plaza.
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Holland.
Aye.
Councilmember Rounds.
Aye.
And Councilmember Fredericks.
Aye.
All right. And then back to the other motion to approve the agenda that was already on the floor. Councilmember Fredericks, and seconded by Councilmember Chapman. Councilmember Fredericks.
No discussion.
Councilmember Chapman.
No discussion.
Any further discussion? All in favor to approve the agenda, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Agenda has passed. At this time, it is 7:09 p.m. and we'll be moving into a public hearing for the Transportation Improvement Program 2021-2026. Mrs. Anderson, do we have anyone that has sent in comments for the Transportation Improvement Plan? We have no citizen communication electronically that has come through. Is there anyone on the call this evening that would like to provide public testimony for Transportation Improvement Program 2021-2026?
Can I ask a question?
Mr. Fredericks.
other than page, I don't know, let me get there. Other than page 9 of the agenda, how would the citizens know? Maybe I just didn't see it in this agenda packet, what they'd be discussing. Is that further in the packet? Maybe I just
There's about 42 pages for the tip, and it was advertised in the paper as well. And there's a map.
Okay.
Hearing nothing else, it is 7:11. We'll go ahead and go back into regular session. Moving on to reports of standing committees, Public Works.
I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Smith. I missed the meeting.
Yeah, I'll take it. 2 seconds. We had a brief discussion of some things that were going on around the city. We mainly talked about a couple of the items that are on the agenda tonight. One of them's consent item F, and we'll pull that one for a little further discussion.
Okay.
That's all I got for right now.
All right, questions for Mr. Smith? All right, seeing none, Public Safety.
Well, I guess that's me. I spoke with the chief this morning, and the only item that was on for business for us was it would be the Spillman mobile flex or module for the purpose of updating ways of reports and things like that would be done. They're modules that fit in the car, and there'll also be one in the office. I spoke with Councilmember Fredericks and Councilmember Plaza, and we all agreed to pursue that item. It had been discussed for the finance part of it with Mr. Boyce and the legalities of everything, where the funds would come from with Mr. Randolph. So thank goodness there will be something in the future that will be more efficient and for the officers to use, and less paper, save the trees. So that was, we did that all by phone today, and it looks like our next meeting is scheduled for the June 15th.
Okay.
And that's all I know.
Questions for Mrs. Graham? Okay. Chief, do you have anything to elaborate on that program?
Yeah.
No, it's just moving forward on that would be a big step towards going paperless, streamline a whole lot of processes, and prepare us for the future should the county decide to go to a Spillman CAD program. It would save numerous steps for the officers, and approval of reports for the sergeants and so on. So it's a good step in the right direction, and I appreciate the committee's efforts to get this before council, only because there's a little bit of a sense of urgency, because if we make that decision now, it's going to save us a little bit of money. If we did it by ourselves, it would be an exponential jump in funding. So it's a good move to get it now.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Okay. And did you say next meeting was the 15th, Mrs. Graham?
Yes.
Okay. And how about Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Graham? Anything?
Oh, it's I spoke with our executive director the other day, and she says the calls have kind of slowed down with everything, of asking questions for whatever it may be. She says that has slowed some. Other than that, we're just waiting to be able to get together again and get discussions for our, hopefully maybe our golf tournament in the end of July. And we did write a letter to Governor, the chamber did write a letter to Governor Inslee about this situation, so.
Okay. When did you send that?
When did, oh my gosh.
Was that last week or was it a couple weeks ago?
It's been almost 3 weeks ago, I think. Between
Okay.
the 2 and 3 week mark.
Okay. Any
And
response?
I do not have a copy of it with me to read it. And all I remember, it was good when it was sent. So supporting our businesses, let's get open, you know.
Did what have you had a response from the governor's office at this point?
I don't think so. No, I believe she said that there has not been any response to that.
Okay. All right. Well, please keep us posted if you do. I'd be curious to hear what the response is going to be.
Yeah, we'll do
Mr.
that.
Plaza, are you with me? Yeah. All right, perfect. Mr. Plaza has been kicked out. I've got him on speakerphone now, just so everybody is aware. So he's here now. Which Mr. Plaza, I'm still showing you as connected to the meeting for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Mrs. Graham in the chamber? Mr. Plaza, for what you missed, Mrs. Graham was speaking how the chamber has sent a letter to Governor Inslee's office asking for businesses to be opened about 3 weeks ago with still no response back yet. So,
Thanks.
which speaks to your question earlier this evening, you bet.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to reports to city officers. Many of you have probably seen the paper this last week and the conversations that we're having here at the city level when it comes to finances and funding. We're projecting what I would consider a massive shortfall in revenue due to the businesses being closed, and that sales tax revenue anticipation is not going to arrive. So with that said, we're taking a number of steps within the city on the administrative side to make sure that we can make up that deficit that is projected. And we started out at about a $350,000 projected shortfall. I sent a letter off to the county asking for them to reopen businesses, and we were denied. I think we spoke about that the last meeting. That was the day that I sent it the day before our last meeting. But the health officer stated that we did not qualify for reopening due to the size of the county, and there was an ask of a phased approach, but that isn't possible. So we've boosted that number up to about 450, and we've come up with about 440, between 430 and $440,000 in savings that we can do, and it's citywide. Not all departments are being affected by this, and we're trying to find some balance there. So as we move forward, the decisions haven't fully been made yet, but we anticipate in the next couple of days we'll have those answers off to those departments and those individuals that are being affected by these decisions. We are also putting in some control measures in place when it comes to overtime, ordering of supplies, and those types of things, which will be discussed as well. We need to use what we have and use what we have now, and then reevaluate what's actually needed, and not have a massive stock of things on hand just to kind of save those dollars. Also, we're looking at heating and cooling and those types of things, what we can do to save additional funding. So we should have an answer out this week, again, not only to yourselves, but to the rest of the city on how we're going to move forward. With that said, it's been very difficult. Obviously, this isn't a situation that we want to be in, but just because we're a government agency, there's multiple businesses that are out there being affected by this, and just because we're government, we're also taking a hit too. So the sooner we can get open, I think the better off we'll all be, and hopefully we can get back to normal. So, and hopefully this is just a temporary situation that our lovely governor has placed us in. So with that said, any questions for me?
I have a question.
Mr. Fredericks.
When are we going to open up city council meetings to be back in council chambers? Is it possible to have our next regularly scheduled meeting, regardless of the governor's executive orders, back in council chambers, done in a safe manner?
That would be, where's my calendar? It's my understanding that we would be able to, but we're still jumping into that. So that would be the June 1st date. And I want to say June 7th is the last day of the latest order, and all my dates are running together. Or at some point on the 8th of June, certain places are able to open, and I was understanding that government might be one of those. But we will definitely, I can get an answer for you and get back to you on that. I would like to.
But by the time you get back to us, it may be nothing that the council can do from a standpoint of action.
I'm tracking. Okay. Yeah, it's 2 weeks out for that first meeting in June. Mr. Boyce, do you have anything to add to that, or should I kick it to Chief Kelly? He's been involved with the IMT.
My understanding is that the county has to meet certain criteria before that can happen. I don't know if we're there yet or not, but I don't know if Chief Kelly has better information than I do at this point.
No, nothing's been discussed. I might find out a little bit more on Thursday when I go back to the face-to-face meetings that we have. But nothing's been discussed up to this point.
I'm gonna take Mr. Frederick's follow-up question that I think he's probably thinking, or some of the other council members are. If we were to meet on June 1st, what are the ramifications, the liability, and the potential enforcement of that?
For me?
Towards the city, from who's enforcing the stay-home order at this point?
Well, the stay-home order is, the county's position is the only enforcement we're taking is inform and educate.
Okay.
But if we decide to violate what the proclamation indicates, then that's setting a bad precedence on a gathering of more than 10 people. So we'd have to wait until after phase 3 in order to accommodate that.
I saw your hand, Mrs. Holland. Just one moment, I'll get to you. Mr. Boyce, is there insurance issues or anything that would affect? Obviously, they're always involved with everything. And then maybe Mr. Randolph can weigh in next.
Right, there could be some liability issues if someone was to become sick from attending a meeting. I think it would be difficult to determine how that individual was stricken with illness, but my main concern is if we don't follow the proclamation, but we try to enforce it on others. I know the chief is saying we're not writing citations or whatnot, we're trying to educate, but it may be more difficult to keep people social distancing in the parks and whatnot. So those are my concerns.
Mr. Randolph, before we get to you, I'm going to jump over to Mrs. Holland here. Mrs. Holland?
All I was going to say is Chief Kelly already mentioned it. As long as it's under 10 people and under, so you have what, 7 council members, a mayor. We don't have to have all of the department heads. They could continue to participate in this way. I'm just, if that's what everybody's really dead set on, there's a way of doing it and still being compliant. We would just also have to socially distance and, there's a way. Exactly, right there.
One.
Okay, so I'll read to you what phase 2 says. It talks about gather no more than 5 people outside your household per week. Limited non-essential travel within the proximity of your home. Remaining manufacturing, this is for businesses and employers. New construction, in-home domestic services, retail store, in-store purchases allowed with restrictions. real estate, professional services, office-based businesses, hair and nail salons, house cleaning, restaurants, 50% capacity, table size no larger than 5. So if we were going to do by phases, we actually wouldn't be authorized to meet until the beginning of phase 3, which would allow gatherings with no more than 50 people. Because in phase 3, the continue to stay home, stay healthy order is still in effect.
Mr. Fredericks?
One presumes that maybe there's some folks out there that would disagree with those phases in a phased approach. I am supportive of having businesses in Woodland be able to open up, and I think we need to make a show that not a show, but a showing of support to the citizens that, you know, we're not going to be fearful here. I don't know how many cases this week have been for Cowlitz County for COVID-19 positive cases, but you know, I think if it were me, I would like to have our meetings open again. We need to start getting back to business. And so if it requires a motion of the council to request that that we open up our meetings again, regardless of Governor Inslee's order, then that's a motion that I'm prepared to make, which then takes it off of the executive branch of government and puts it square right in the lap of, what are you going to do? Are you going to take us to jail for having a meeting of the public? I mean, is that where we're at? Because it sounds like it, because we're not following the appropriately phased approach that our governor would like us to follow. So, I'm prepared to make that motion if we need to. And it sounds like maybe there's some people that would be apprehensive to doing just that. Maybe they feel that it can't be done in a safe manner. I believe that it can be done in a safe manner, and I believe we need to start at our first meeting in June.
Mr. Goddard?
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? I haven't tested my, okay. So the Planning Commission is having a meeting this Thursday, and we had advertised before the lockdown for this meeting, and it was advertised for in the council chambers. And the problem that we ran into in trying to prepare for this meeting is normally a meeting is recorded and broadcast directly onto YouTube using our traditional system. But everybody who is in this meeting currently is on a web-based system, a web-based platform. And the problem we discussed when talking about the Planning Commission, we are going to have 2 separate and distinct communication corridors. So there will be some people watching it on YouTube, and they could be typing in YouTube, whereas any of you who are at home participating in the conference call, you would not be able to see or hear those comments. Also, for example, the main conference room now, if there was somebody in the audience, a member of the public who was giving testimony, from the conference call point of view, you could not hear or see that person who's giving testimony. So the problem that we discovered, and that is by doing a half in-person, half conference call, is there would be no interaction between the Planning Commission and the citizen who's giving testimony, because they're in different modes. One's in real life and the other online. So we have yet to be able to figure out how to bridge that gap. So the Planning Commission will be completely online. However, I have the mayor's position of sitting in the council chamber so that if somebody does come visit, they will be able to watch the presentation, listen to the presentation, and if they want to give testimony, I'm going to literally have to give them my cell phone so that they can speak in the conference call. So logistically, I think we are a little bit of a ways from figuring out how to bridge that gap.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Mr. Randolph?
Yes, Mayor. I mean, I see the value in what Councilmember Holland was saying, that I think there's value in the council getting together with the mayor. I agree the department heads can appear, public participation can still occur and listening to it. What I would suggest is and the council chamber is large enough, you know, to maintain social distancing and those sort of precautions. It seems like a well-ventilated place. I would think that it would be possible to have that meeting under 10, have it valuable by having the meetings, and we could aim to do it that first meeting in June. I could work with Mr. Goddard, and we can find if there's some reasons to turn it off or some reasons to tweak. If we find out at the last minute, then we can go back to this. But I see value in trying to have a meeting, that first meeting in June.
Okay. Okay.
I will know a lot more Friday morning after we've had to try it experimental-wise once.
Chief Kelly, and I know Mr. Fredericks that you're looking at a timeline of getting back together on June 1st, and council not getting back together to take some action right now, not having that ability. When would phase 3 start, just so we have a timeline? Or well, when would phase 2 for Cowlitz County even start?
Well, it's actually open to interpretation. The first phase started on May 5th. So it's supposed to be every 3 weeks, but every 3 weeks, depending on certain things. If there's no cases or no cases and so on. So according to the governor's information that's come out, it's every 3 weeks. So our next phase, phase 2, begins Monday, the 25th. And the phase 3 potentially couldn't do anything until, let's see, the 15th, June 15th would be the beginning of phase 2. Yeah, so that might be the council meeting that we could actually physically get together or be in the same room. I mean, I guess, you know, if we were going to do a council meeting, we could spread out in the council without the exec staff there. But, you know, that's up to you guys.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, Mr. Plaza on the phone, go ahead.
So if moving from one phase to the next is dependent on there not being any new cases, just to clarify, is that any new cases in the state or any new cases in the county or in the city or what?
Any new cases in the county. The county is the determining factor, I guess.
Okay.
And can I ask a clarifying question on that?
Mr. Fredericks?
We're one of 6 cities in the state of Washington that are separated by a county line. Does that matter if it's in Clark or Cowlitz? Are we now subject to the rules of 2 different counties?
Potentially, we could be subject to two different rules.
Garbage.
So.
Mr. Randolph?
Yes, but the council will only be meeting in Cowlitz County, so I think that would be governing.
We would be following Cowlitz County rules at this point.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith?
Sorry.
Oh,
Can I go again?
wait, Mr. Plaza. Go ahead, Mr. Plaza.
So, okay, so for the council, it goes by Cowlitz County, but if we were looking at reopening the city, it's potentially possible that we may have to wait for Clark County to not have any cases versus Cowlitz?
No, Mr. Randolph said because the meeting would be taking place in Cowlitz County, we'll be following Cowlitz County rules.
Right. No, I understood that part
okay.
for the city council, but what about for the city itself to move into the next phase?
Oh, that's a great question. So, Mr. Randolph, I don't know if you heard that or not. So the question was, so if we're part of 2 counties, but Cowlitz County is a different phase than Clark County, are we still able to phase forward, or do we need to phase the city differently?
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that there's so much variation, because I know also the governor is opening up some of the smaller counties and allowing restaurants to have business as well. As far as being able to do it that first meeting in June, I'm not sure. But you know, gatherings are already occurring. I would be glad to staff that with Pete and try and come up with suggestions. So if y'all want to, I mean, because I think you have two issues. The simpler issue is whether on June 1st, the council and the mayor can meet together, stay under 10. I would think that we could do that. And I also would think that we could research and maybe for that meeting on the 1st, discuss that issue of how, I mean, I think it's great to start talking about how would an opening up of Woodland look like? How would we phase it? And try and see if we can have consensus and make sure that we stay within the rules, which seem to be fairly flexible.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith?
I was just going to say that it was county-based and not us being divided. It's only county-based on what the opening was. That's all I was going to add.
Okay, thank you. Chief Nor?
Yeah, I don't know how relevant it is to all this, but the latest information I have is that the proclamation that allows open public meetings to happen over the web and not in person expires on May 31st. So if the governor doesn't extend that, are you legally obligated to have a meeting, you know, a open public meeting? Now, so I'm not sure how the rules of the county saying, hey, you can't have people there may affect that. But if the governor doesn't extend that, then we're bound to follow the law that says you have to have an open meeting. That's just, I guess what I'm saying is, to me, unless it gets extended, it expires on May 31st, the exemption from the Open Public Meetings Act.
Gotcha. Thank you, Chief Nor. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Fredericks? I don't know if we satisfied the question that was asked or not. Sounds like we're still in a balancing act of some sorts, trying to find a way to get back together, but then also bound by all these rules.
Mayor, I mean, is there some consensus to try and aim for an open meeting of the mayor and the council members with others attending? Is that the consensus to try and plan for June 1st?
Mr. Fredericks?
Well, I'd like to be there tonight in an open public meeting. I feel that I could take, and this group could take appropriate safeguards to protect ourselves, even if it included masks. If it included masks for people to enter the chambers, if it required us to have hand sanitizer, if it required us to be 6 feet apart. I believe we've had plenty of time to figure out how to adjust to the new norm. And I am very uncomfortable having these meetings through this type of process. I don't like it. My absences lately have been a lot of that because of this. I do not like it. So we can try all we want, but doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy that we're going to be doing anything different other than what we're doing right now come June 1st.
Mr. Smith?
We've had other meetings in more open capacity, bigger areas. I know with the schools, we've had them in the schools before, haven't we? Is that an option?
We could ask if you think we need more space to spread out. Mrs. Holland?
Well, according to the governor's directive, I am allowed to stand less than a foot apart from a client at the food bank as long as I have a mask on, and we have provided everyone with hand sanitizer, the option of gloves and a mask. And I keep the number of volunteers and shoppers 10 and under. So in that capacity, I'm able to do that because there's food involved. But in council chambers, there's plenty of room if everybody skipped a chair and we went every other, we'd be about 6 feet apart, and then you could have a couple people in the gallery area. I mean, realistically, you could stay 6 feet apart. It's interesting that at a grocery store, they have less rules around food than we're just trying to have a simple meeting. So, I mean, it's really, I guess, if everybody is interested in that, it's would set precedence. But I happen to agree. I think it's we have to look at ways to move beyond this. This isn't it forever. So, but I just know the rules that the Department of Health has. They email me almost 3 times a week telling me what I can and cannot do in a food bank to be safe. So I'm pretty sure we could handle council chambers with a handful of people. So.
Okay. So,
Mayor?
Mr. Randall, to answer your question, yes, I think that we're looking to get together on June 1st in a safe way and putting protective measures in place. So I guess to answer your question, yes.
Okay, that sounds great, and I'll work with Pete and we'll figure out how to do it.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on that topic? Okay.
Mayor?
Thank you. Yes.
And I don't know if it's appropriate. I have no objection reading a motion in so the council can take an official position on this and take it from staff.
Okay.
The council.
You want to do that now, or you want to wait until the action items portion?
That's fine.
Okay, I'll make a note. All right, Mr. Boyce, you're up.
Okay. Lately, everything's been centered around the budget, looking at sales tax shortfalls. Just so council and the public know, I've been meeting or participating in conference calls with a number of city administrators and managers across the state. We've had input from economists out of King County and others trying to project where the sales tax is going. And it's difficult. There's a lot of educated guesses in this. But we think our projections are very much in the ballpark of where we're going to be. The sales tax numbers are about 2 months delayed in getting to us. So right now we know what happened in January and February, but March is really when it starts to hit, and April should be even worse. So we're hoping the budget reductions we're talking about with the mayor are going to be sufficient to carry us through. We've been working with the Teamsters unions, bargaining units, trying to find a way to move forward. And as the mayor said this week, we hope to have some finalized decisions made. And with that said, with these cuts, as we've been telling you in the past few years, we've been making other cuts. You know, it can affect services, and we are working with the executive team to report to City Council once those final determinations on budget reductions are made, what impact that will have on services. So hopefully June 1st, we can report that to City Council and the public and have a discussion about that. So we're working really hard on that now. Yeah, we look forward to the June 1st meeting so we can have some discussions with council. That's my report.
Questions for Mr. Boyce? Not seeing any. And just one last comment on our last topic there, and all of it actually goes together. But the community is just as frustrated as you are. The letters and the phone calls and things that I'm receiving are indicating that the same level of frustration, looking for those answers. We've got churches that are calling saying, hey, we're allowed to have drive-through service, but can I open up my bathroom? And we can't get any direction from that except, well, the order doesn't really say that you can use the facility, but again, they're willing to put those safe practices into place where it's one family at a time. They've got the sanitizers, they've got the masks, and they're taking turns throughout the building to utilize the facilities. So those are hard discussions to have because folks are looking to get back to their normal and back to their livelihoods. And dog grooming, I know it sounds silly, but we've got a dog groomer here in town that it's not open and still paying rent, but can't work because we're not in phase 2. So it's unfortunate, and I hope that we can get through this faster than
Mayor
we are.
Finn?
Yes.
Who would be enforcing if a church were to have a gathering? Who would be enforcing that at our local level? Would that be Woodland PD? Would that be the county? Would it be the state? Who's actually going to actually do something if that were the case?
There's levels. There's a level. There's a phased approach, I guess you could call it, where you start with the education. Hey, this is what the governor's orders are, and the chief can probably speak more to this than I can. But it's about education and at the lowest level and trying to get compliance. So when it comes
when there is no compliance, can you tell me how that would work? That's what I'm after. I know it's about education. I'm looking for what happens if somebody says, yeah, thank you, go pound sand. Thank you for the education.
It's a misdemeanor crime.
And it's also potentially a nuisance, so it can be enforced probably either criminally or civilly. But again, I think the approach is to try and get compliance. But if there's someone that was defiant, there would be means to do it. It could be expensive, though.
Who would enforce that?
The Woodland Police Department.
The Woodland Police Department is enforcing that in the city limits of Woodland. Is that what I heard? Okay.
Yes, that's correct answer. Yes.
That's our job, is to enforce the laws within the city limits of Woodland.
Question.
Mr. Plaza.
So are the governor's orders, have those been actually signed as a law, or are they just, for lack of a better word, an executive order, something that he's telling us to do? But not an actual RCW or anything like that? What's the status on those?
It is an RCW because it's an emergency proclamation.
And that's exactly it, is that with the governor's emergency powers, that changes the normal legal regime that we're used to.
Mr. Randolph, is there a time?
Discussion considering the exact same thing that's been going down in Oregon. There was all the laws that, not all of them, but a large majority of the laws that she's been passing, specifically considering gathering of people and churches and whatnot, have been found to be unconstitutional. Do you guys know if there's been any reevaluation of those in our state?
I don't know about Washington, but in other states, they've enforced it with tickets. They can enforce it with nuisance. You have a heated debate in some states that are going on. Obviously, if you bring charges, someone could claim a constitutional right, and that would be years to resolve in court.
And whose court costs would pay those?
It would be the enforcement cost would be the agency that brought it. There is no magic fund that I'm aware of that would reimburse us for it. And obviously the individual would have to defend himself on his own funds. If he was indigent, there could be an obligation there. We're cutting new ground. I mean, there's no book out there, and you go to page 17, paragraph 3, and it says this is what happens. Most of the city attorneys are in communication, and they are beginning to investigate some of those issues. And what they have come up with is it's a misdemeanor, so you can hand it as a police. It's a nuisance, that you have that's been created that would not be debatable in court. But even then, when you're talking about code enforcement, you're talking about actions over time. And on top of that, you have the problem that you don't really have access to the courts. I mean, right now you have to have something emergency before you can have a telephone conference with the judges. And I don't think it would be viewed as an emergency. So there would be a lot of disconnects, there would be frustrations, but there certainly are enforcement. I mean, and I would not tell someone, oh, don't worry about it, it's just a bluff. People could use you to be the example.
One more thing.
Mr. Plaza.
I'm just going to throw this out there and then I'll be out of this conversation, but I would hope that people in the state, people in the city that are responsible for enforcing these things remember that their oath of office, they swore to uphold the Constitution. And there has been Supreme Court cases that have stated that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any state laws that contradict the contradiction of null and void. So I would hope that our law enforcement professionals, our health officers, and anybody else that may be involved in the enforcement aspect of this, keep that in mind before they kick a hornet's nest that probably shouldn't be kicked, or wouldn't be a good idea to open that can of worms. So that's all I'd like to say on that.
I don't think we're going to have a rogue enforcement. I think if an enforcement occurred, I think there would be a lot of discussions between staff and the mayor and the council before decisions were taken. Obviously, if suddenly there is a upturn in infections, we enter into a whole new world. So it's hard to speculate now on what we should or should not do. I like the idea of trying to do a limited meeting on June 1st. Everyone wants to get back to normal. That seems like a logical next step that we can do. As far as the constitutional issues, that's years ahead.
All right. Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Randolph. Oh, Mr. Frederick.
Question for Mr. Randolph, and I'll leave it at that so we can get back to our business. But provided that you, what were to happen if I understand this correctly, if let's say the church up the street here decides they want to have a church service, and Woodland officer discretion decides that he's going to go and start writing up misdemeanors, if someone claims a violation of their First Amendment right, are you saying that if that is a court action that someone were to take, that the city of Woodland would be liable for that court case and that battle?
That is actually a battle that has been fought, and it has worked its way up to the senior Supreme Court state levels. The classic example is, I think, in Louisville, Kentucky. They tried to have churches that had basically like a parking lot. Everyone stayed in their car, but they all connected to the same thing. The governor said that was illegal and tried to shut it down. That decision was challenged by the Attorney General of Kentucky, and they went very rapidly up to the Kentucky Supreme Court. And the problem is that was, in the court's view, a clear discrimination, because you had restaurants going on, you had a lot of other activity, and it seemed to be in isolation going after a religious issue. And so that was an issue that went up pretty quickly. So if you are not if the only one you're enforcing it against is churches or mosques or synagogues, I think you'd have a problem quickly. But churches should be careful.
So I guess from an executive branch of government, I'm not sure how you work through those processes when it actually happens in the city. I'd be really interested to hear how that would work, and how that law would be enforced. But that's not our role. Your guys' job is to enforce the law. I just hope it's done in a way that doesn't put us at risk when we're sitting here talking about less finances to run the city. So I hope it doesn't happen, but I'm sure we're all prepared for when it does, because it's getting to that point.
All right, thank you, everybody. Moving on to consent items on this portion of the agenda.
I had something to report.
Yes, Mr. Randolph, go ahead.
Just two things is that I've had an opportunity to work with Chief Knorr on the annexation issue. Appreciate all your help, Chief. And I was talking with Cowlitz Elections today. They are cooperating with Clark. Cowlitz is the lead agency, and based what they said, we're on track for having that vote in early August. So that's one item. The other thing which will impact the Public Safety Committee is that in accordance with our code, if the Humane Society director makes a finding of a potentially dangerous dog, that person has a right to appeal to the city's Public Safety Committee. That finding has been made and the owners have indicated that they're going to appeal to the Public Safety Committee. I will work with the committee and figure out the issues. I'm also talking with the Humane director.
Do we have any issues in Woodland right now with dangerous animals? Or this is just setting the stage
What
for it?
it was that they have two categories. They have a potentially dangerous, and I don't want to comment too much on it because they're going to have to do it. But what happened was one dog attacked another dog. It's working its way through the Humane Society, and the director has not made the written findings yet. But once she makes them, within 10 days, they have the right to appeal to the Public Safety Committee. Filing the appeal. When it will be held will be sometime in the future. But it was an interesting thing that I was not aware of, and so but it will affect the council. So I was just giving a heads up that this issue was on the horizon.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Randolph. Appreciate that. Moving on to consent items this evening.
Move to approve consent items A through E, and we'll pull consent item F for further discussion.
Okay.
I'll second.
I think I got Mr. Plaza on that one. Consent items A through E by Mr. Smith and seconded by Mr. Plaza. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, A through E have been passed. Moving on to consent item E, authorize the mayor to sign notice of change order number 2 with Clark & Sons Construction for CAP-16-04 Scott Hill Road and OPH frontage and utility improvement.
I think E was in that, wasn't it, in the last motion for approval?
E was approved.
Yes.
F. Oh, I said E? Oh, I'm sorry. That was F that I just read. I'm sorry. Yes, no. I read F but said E. That was F, what I just read.
Okay.
I apologize.
So I think the engineer is on here for action item F.
Yes, I am. Is there a motion to discuss or?
A motion to discuss consent item F further? How do I go about doing this?
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to approve it or approve this, and then we would have discussion, and then there would be a vote, up or down.
Okay, a motion to approve consent item F.
Second.
All right, moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Plaza. Councilmember Smith.
We talked about it at length in the Public Works meeting, and I think the engineer is on the call, and I'm hoping he can kind of walk us through how we got to the point of being over the engineer's estimates.
Yes, this is Robert Balmelli, RB Engineering. Specifically change, I know you've already went through change order 1. Did you need any discussion on that, or you just want to change over 2?
I guess just walk us through the how we got to being over the 180,000 originally, and just kind of what, I guess just walk us through the process of where we're at right now. I know we've approved change order 1, and I know there's some questions on change order 1 about we're going back on change order 2 to do some more work that potentially should have been done on change order 1.
Possibly. So what
Robert?
happened? Change order 1. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I would start with the process that we had an original contract at 128,000. Change order 1 came in for a certain dollar amount, 68,000 or whatever it was. It was for A, B, and C. And then, and the reason why, so yeah, just go that route.
As Tracy mentioned, the original contract was 128 and change. What happened generated change order number 1 is the connection of the new sewer to the existing manhole. They uncovered that at the connection point, and there was a high pressure gas main right in the direct conflict with the connection at the manhole. It was deeper than it normally is, so it wasn't anticipated to be down there. So to remedy that situation, the only other way to get into the manhole was to be on the opposite side of that gas main. And unfortunately, the 16-inch water main is on the opposite side of the gas main. So the new sewer had to go where the water's going. So that's why we had to move the 16-inch water main, which generated change order number 1. It did simplify the sewer design. So we did get some benefits in change order number 1, some cost reductions, which helped offset the overall cost of the water main. Any questions on that?
Not yet.
Okay. So we got the water main changed, and they put the sewer in, and then there's another part of this project which is redoing the storm drain lines, as there were some conflicts with those too. So to get all the pipes to flow correctly, we had to change the grade on the storm culvert underneath Scott Hill Road. So when we started on that work, there was an existing catch basin that was, I guess wasn't I don't know when it was stalled, but they had took a concrete pipe and broke the top out of it and stuck a catch basin on top of it. So it can't be reused, so we have to replace that catch basin, and that generated the majority of change order number 2. So the paving portion of change order 2 is to better, I would say, we're increasing the grinding limits, and we're repaving more area. So the intersection won't be all piecemealed from a bunch of patches. So that's the reason for the additional grinding and paving costs that are in change order number 2.
Okay, I guess that's my main question, was the paving cost and why that wasn't included on change order 1.
I guess it wasn't until, we saw the patching and then talking with Tracy. I mean, obviously you want a finished product that's presentable and it's not going to be a maintenance problem. But yeah, we could include it in change order 1.
Okay.
But it wasn't, unfortunately.
Okay. So at this point, we're going over the $180,000 budget, which was estimated by you, I'm assuming.
Yes, my estimate.
It's kind of tough. It's kind of tough right now with everything that's going, especially since the city's cutting costs and we're going over the budget. That's the problem I have with it. At the end of the day, I mean, we discussed it, and it sounds like the road has to be repaired. It's a very active road, and it'll end up causing more problems at the end of the day. But I think it was needed to have the council hear exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Mr. Plaza.
No comment.
Further discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Fredericks.
What is the total amount that we're going over? It's confusing when I'm looking at page 65 of 77 on the agenda. Are we going over $22,000? And if so, no, we're going over $62,000. No.
10,000.
Okay, that's the number that I originally had after doing my simple math. So my question is, regardless, this is what we need to do. Where are those funds going to come from? And does it require a budget amendment as well?
It will require a budget amendment, and the funds will come from water and sewer. about 5,000 apiece, or maybe 6,400.
Got it. Thank you.
Anything further? All right, seeing no hands or anyone else, well, motion on the floor is to approve consent item F, authorize the mayor to sign notice of change order number 2 with Clark & Sons for frontage and utility improvements, Scott Hill Road. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Consent item F is passed. Moving on to action items, Mr. Fredericks. You had a motion?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and take a stab at it. I move that the city of Woodland, regardless of Governor Inslee's stay-at-home executive order, have our next regularly scheduled meeting in an open public format and not through any web-based format.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Fredericks, seconded by Councilmember Plaza. Councilmember Fredericks.
I have no discussion.
Councilmember Plaza.
No comment.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Will all those in favor of the City of Woodland, regardless of Governor Inslee's stay-at-home order, to attend the next, I'm trying to get this, I took notes, regular scheduled meeting that is not a web-based format in person on June 1st, 2020. I added the date in for.
I just hope nobody requests me to put the motion in writing.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The motion passed 7-0. All right, the time is now 8:07. We are moving into a workshop. Mr. Goddard, are you gonna be able to make it?
Yep.
You think so? Okay. Shoreline Master Plan Periodic Update Grant and Public Participation Plan. I'm going to kick this over to Mr. Goddard for discussion and uploading of council.
Thank you. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the packet. The City of Woodland is required to update its shoreline program every 8 years, and the 8-year rotation date is 2021. So we received a grant from the Department of Ecology, and in your packet is our proposed public participation program for how we're going to engage the public. If you look at your package on page 4, there's a list of stakeholders that we've identified, and we're asking if you can think of anybody else who you would like us to engage. Please email me those contacts if you don't have any now. And then section 4.0 is the timeline, and this is the proposed timeline, starting with talking to you about it today in the Planning Commission on Thursday. We will put some videos on our website, design a survey, hold an open house. We are going to do mailings to all of the property owners in the shoreline and give them the opportunity to speak with staff and give us input. And then you can see there's a series of conference calls and Planning Commission workshops, because hopefully we will be able to engage the public face-to-face in the council chambers, hopefully by July or August, and then it would come to the City Council some point after that. So if you have any comments for me, I'd be more than happy to take some notes or answer questions.
Mr. Goddard?
Mr.
Yes.
Fredericks.
So I'm looking at page 73. Are these the changes that we're going to be discussing? I see years attached to it, 2019, 2017. Were those changes that were made in previous years?
So yes, so the object of that list is it's kept by Department of Ecology to let cities and counties know what changes were made to the Shoreline Management Act by the state legislature during those years. And then the second column was staff went through and determined, do we need to make any changes? So for 2019, the only change was the change of value for exemption. And so we will make that quick update, and that's our action on the right-hand side. We just need to change the dollar number in our plan. And then there were no changes in 2018. 2017, they had a lot of changes. 2016, there were a few changes. And prior to that, our code or our current shoreline program was not in place. So we know that we met the 2014, 2012, 2011 changes because they were already in effect when we got our plan adopted.
And how do we know that the changes that are being reviewed, do we have an understanding of how this will benefit anybody living on a shoreline? And how are we to ensure that the rules that we have already adopted or are about to adopt are not rules that are great for Puget Sound area, and they're actually rules that make sense for our area?
That is part of the purpose of this effort. Is, for example, the 19A is simply a threshold for docks. So if a homeowner wanted to build a dock, say on Horseshoe Lake, the price of that dock has to be based on the current value of that dock. And that amount used to be in the $7,000 range, and they add a cost of living and inflation every year. And it's now up to $11,200. So by not updating this change, we would be putting an outdated limit on how much dock someone could build on Horseshoe Lake if they got a permit or they need a permit.
So I have a maximum then of, or I have to spend at least $11,200 on a dock. Is that how I'm reading that?
So that is a maximum for an exemption. So in other words, if you're building a small dock, you don't need a shoreline permit. It's just a exemption review. But if you're doing a big dock, like let's say Public Works do a large dock for multiple boats, then our Parks Department would have to get a shoreline permit as opposed to an exemption letter.
Got it. So if my dock was $9,000, I'm fine.
Yeah,
well,
you're fine.
Really,
but
really
if it's
fine.
But if it's $26,000, you would have to get a permit.
Right. Okay.
And that's an example of how we look at specifically what the ordinance says, or the RCW says in the first column. When we took a look at it, and for 2017A, on page 2-23, we know that there's a small change that need to be made to make it applicable, and on down the line. So this is kind of the first framework, and we'll take each one of these items one by one and have a conversation with property owners who own the property in the shoreline.
And I'm assuming you've had an opportunity to review our existing shoreline management plan.
Yes.
In doing so, did you find anything in there that makes you scratch your head and go, why would this be applicable in the city of Woodland?
Not necessarily in our shoreline program. It's not that old, but one of the first things I did notice is in the zoning code in Title 15 for the environment, Chapter 15.06, it still refers to the Candlelight County Shoreline Master Program, and it wasn't updated since 1978. So, for example, we're kind of missing that connection between the city code and our adopted plans.
Okay.
All right, any other comments or thoughts from Mr. Goddard on the project? Okay, so council is where we have received citizen comment, which isn't something that we normally take during a workshop. We normally take those at the beginning of the meeting. So it is comments that have been passed along about citizen engagement and the complexity of participating in this process. So we're going to make sure that those comments get over to Mr. Goddard to be addressed and respond to the citizen that submitted that.
Okay.
Anything else on this topic before we go out of workshop?
For clarification, Mayor, was that citizen communication for this meeting that they're having difficulty logging in?
No, it was in regards to the project itself and how to become engaged with it. As Mr. Goddard said, there's a plan for community outreach and engagement. It's referencing that as from what I can see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, seeing nothing else, it's 8:15. We'll be out of workshop, and we've come to the portion of our meeting for adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Rounds, second by Councilmember Chapman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, it is 8:16 and we are out of the meeting. I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you everybody for attending this evening.